In just 4 decades, China has lifted nearly 800 million people out of poverty. Over this time, the number of individuals in China living on less than $1.90 per day, the international poverty line set by the World Bank to measure global extreme poverty, has decreased by almost 800 million. Remarkably, China has accounted for nearly 3/4 of the global decline in extreme poverty. But how did China accomplish this monumental feat? How did a country historically burdened by poverty evolve into the world's second-largest economy, even instilling fear in the United States? The answer lies in this video. But first, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to show your support. Now let's explore how China managed to eliminate poverty in just 40 years. In 1978, China was facing an overwhelming challenge. Nearly 90% of its population lived in extreme poverty, and the economy was stuck in a rut. The government tightly controlled every aspect of life, from production to pricing, leaving little space for innovation or individual entrepreneurship. The country struggled to meet basic needs, and growth seemed like a distant dream. It was obvious that something had to change if China was ever to escape this downward spiral. That's when Deng Xiaoping, a visionary leader, stepped onto the scene, ready to reshape China's economic future. Deng's philosophy was refreshingly straightforward. It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. In other words, results mattered more than rigid ideology. Deng knew that China needed to break away from its old closed system and learn from other nations' successes. So under his leadership, China opened its doors to the world, embracing market-oriented reforms and looking for opportunities to tap into the global economy. This decision was a true game-changer. By inviting foreign investment, China was able to jumpstart its economy, create jobs, and revive industries that had long been stagnant. The arrival of multinational corporations didn't just bring money, it also introduced modern manufacturing techniques, technology, and management practices that China could absorb and adapt. This was a crucial step for a country that had been isolated for so long. China began studying the strategies of countries like Japan, South Korea, and Singapore, which had successfully integrated capitalist elements into their economies. These nations showed that by encouraging foreign investment and market competition, significant economic growth could follow. Inspired by their success, Deng sought to replicate this model in China. As part of this strategy, China began striking deals with foreign companies, inviting them to set up factories and operations within its borders. The offer was simple but appealing. Foreign firms could access China's vast supply of cheap labor and its enormous untapped market. In return, China would benefit from the technology and expertise these companies brought with them. Economist Richard Woff has explained this dynamic brilliantly, how China's approach led to a win-win situation for both sides.
People say that the Chinese built on the West's technology. That's true. Of course that's true. But the Chinese didn't do that in any mysterious way. 25 years ago, they made a decision that they would say to the developed world whom they hoped to imitate, the United States, Western Europe, Japan, and so on. We will give you a deal. We understand you're capitalists. We understand that profit is the bottom line, blah, blah, blah. And here's what we're going to give you. 2 things. Number 1, an educated, disciplined, incredibly cheap labor force. And number 2, the biggest growing market in the world. Look, I'm a professor of economics. I've taught in business schools on and off all my life. In a business school, we tell budding young entrepreneurs, if you want to know where to go and focus your energy, go where the labor is cheap and the market is growing. Okay, they went to China. And they went because they did exactly what we told them to do. They made a ton of money. That forced all of those who were not yet ready to do that to realize if you don't go to China too, these guys are going to outcompete you. They're going to bring that stuff back, made with cheaper labor, and they have the Chinese market. You know, General Motors now sells more cars in China than it does in the United States. These are the developments, and everybody wanted to do it, but the Chinese did it. And by the way, I don't mean to single them out so much. The Indians, by that I mean the people in the country called India, the Indians, they're doing a version of it. Not the version the Chinese, and they can't quite match the Chinese yet.
At the same time, China didn't abandon its political structure, but rather blended it with capitalist principles, especially when it came to poverty alleviation. The government actively promoted private entrepreneurship, allowing individuals to start businesses and build wealth. This unleashing of entrepreneurial spirit led to a surge in small and medium-sized enterprises, which by 2020 accounted for over 60% of China's GDP and provided more than 80% of urban employment. A key strategy in this transformation was the introduction of special economic zones, where the government created favorable conditions for foreign investors. These zones were essentially playgrounds for capitalism, where businesses could enjoy lower taxes, less regulation, and access to cheap labor. Shenzhen, once a quiet fishing village with barely 30,000 people, was one of the first special economic zones established in 1980. Within a few decades, it had grown into a bustling metropolis of over 17 million people and a global technology hub, home to companies like Huawei and Tencent. The SEZs became magnets for foreign investment. In 1984, Coca-Cola became one of the first major Western companies to re-enter China, setting up a bottling plant in the city of Guangzhou. Other multinationals like General Motors, Volkswagen, and IBM soon followed, attracted by the cheap labor and growing market. By opening up its markets to the world, China started its journey toward industrialization. In 1980, China's foreign direct investment inflows were a mere $57 million, but by 2020, that figure had exploded to over $149 billion. The results were staggering. Between 1981 and 2019, more than 850 million people in China escaped poverty. The poverty rate, which stood at 88% in 1981, fell to less than 1% by 2019. GDP growth averaged 9.5% annually during this period, driving job creation and improving living standards across the nation. By integrating into global trade networks, China became the world's factory, leveraging its massive labor force and attracting businesses from all corners of the globe. While China earned its early reputation as the world's factory, cranking out affordable goods thanks to low-cost labor, it didn't stop there. In the last couple of decades, the country has made a massive shift from simply assembling products to becoming a major player in tech and innovation. Companies like Huawei, Alibaba, and Xiaomi aren't just well known within China, they're now global powerhouses. Instead of relying on producing goods for other brands, China is designing and engineering cutting-edge technologies, competing head-on with the biggest names from the US, Europe, and Japan. China's transformation from deep poverty to a global economic powerhouse is nothing short of extraordinary. By opening its doors to foreign investment and evolving from low-cost manufacturing to cutting-edge innovation, the country lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, creating one of the most remarkable success stories in modern history. If China succeeded in lifting 800 million people out of poverty over the past 40 years, what other remarkable achievements could it reach in the next 40 years? Share your thoughts and leave your comments below. If you like what you watched, hit the like button and most importantly, subscribe to this channel to show your support.